You've been preparing for the wrong war. Right now, at this exact moment, you probably have supplies stockpiled based on a scenario that military strategists abandoned decades ago. Total nuclear annihilation, scorched earth, radioactive wasteland where nothing survives. That's the prep plan for 97% of people in this space. Beans, bullets, bunker in the woods. And it's based on a complete misunderstanding of modern warfare doctrine. Let me tell you what actually happens when World War III starts. Cities don't get vaporized, populations don't get exterminated, infrastructure gets disabled, power grids collapse, supply chains break, communications go dark, and the landscape stays intact. Buildings remain standing. Water systems still exist. The physical world is still there. What changes is who controls it and who understands how to operate it. The 97% are preparing for extinction. The 3% are preparing for disruption and occupation. That difference is everything. Here's the myth that's going to kill most preppers. Total nuclear annihilation. The mushroom clouds over every major city. Scorched earth from coast to coast. Radioactive wasteland where the only survivors are the ones who got deep underground before the first warheads hit. It's a compelling image. It's also strategically obsolete. Modern warfare doctrine doesn't aim for extinction. It aims for control. Let me explain what actually happens when peer adversaries engage in large-scale conflict. The objective isn't to destroy populations. The objective is to disable capability. You don't need to kill 100 million people to neutralize a nation's ability to project power. You need to cut their communications, collapse their logistics, disable their energy infrastructure, and fracture their command structure. That's exponentially more efficient than carpet bombing residential areas, and it achieves the strategic goal without creating global environmental catastrophe that kills your own population too. What gets targeted? Power grids, transformer stations, generation facilities, distribution nodes, communications hubs, satellite ground stations, fiber optic junction points, cell tower networks, logistics infrastructure, railways, ports, major highways, fuel refineries, military command and control. Not schools, not hospitals, not apartment buildings. The buildings stay standing, the people stay alive. What collapses is the system that connects them. This isn't speculation. This is how modern military planners think about large-scale disruption. The Cold War doctrine of mutually assured destruction assumed total annihilation because that was the only framework available with 1960s technology and Soviet-American ideology. Current strategic thinking operates on precision targeting and infrastructure degradation. You can disable a nation without destroying it, but the 97% are still preparing for 1962. They've stockpiled for the wasteland. They've planned their evacuation to rural bunkers. They've built their survival strategy around a scenario where cities become uninhabitable, and the only option is to flee to remote locations and wait out the radiation. Here's what that means operationally. When infrastructure conflict starts, when the power goes out and communications go dark and supply chains break, they're going to run. They're going to load their vehicles with their stockpiles and drive toward the wilderness. They're going to compete with millions of other people who made the exact same plan, and they're going to arrive at resource-scarce locations with no production infrastructure, no defensive positions, and a finite supply of everything they need to survive. The buildings they're fleeing are still standing. The water systems are still there. The industrial facilities are still operational. They just need someone who understands how to run them. That's the vacuum. While 97% evacuate toward scarcity, urban infrastructure sits abandoned, not destroyed, abandoned. The 3% understand that running from functioning systems toward the woods is the opposite of strategic thinking. The real advantage isn't in the mountains. It's in the ghost infrastructure. Everyone else just fled. Let me show you the first location the 97% will ignore completely: municipal water treatment facilities and pumping stations. While they're hoarding bottled water, filling their basements with cases of Aquafina and Dasani, stacking gallon jugs until they run out of space, you're walking into a concrete fortress that produces clean water continuously, indefinitely, at industrial scale. Here's what they see when they look at a water treatment plant: a boring government building, pipes and tanks, no immediate survival value, nothing they can grab and put in a backpack. They drive right past it on their evacuation route and never think about it again. Here's what you see: a facility designed to process millions of gallons per day, multi-stage filtration systems, chemical dosing equipment for disinfection, UV treatment chambers, backup generators with fuel storage, industrial pumps rated for 24/7 operation, and most importantly, infrastructure that runs with minimal human supervision. When conflict disrupts infrastructure, the staff evacuates. The operators, the managers, the technicians who run the plant during normal times, they leave. They're not staying to defend municipal property during a crisis. But the physical systems remain. Concrete buildings don't evacuate. Steel tanks don't run. The equipment is still there. It just needs someone who understands how to operate it. The technical knowledge required is not complex. Water treatment follows basic principles: coagulation to clump particles, filtration to remove them, disinfection to kill pathogens. The systems are designed for reliability, not sophistication. You can learn the fundamentals in a few days of focused study. Municipal treatment plants have operating manuals. They have diagnostic displays. They have systems designed so operators with basic training can run them. Compare that to the 97% strategy. The average person stores maybe 3 days to 2 weeks of water. Let's run the numbers. You need approximately 1 gallon per person per day just for drinking. Add washing, cooking, sanitation, and you're looking at 3 to 5 gallons per person per day. A family of 4 goes through 12 to 20 gallons daily. That stockpile runs out in days, maybe 2 weeks if they ration severely. Then what? You're sitting inside a facility that can process 50,000 gallons per day. That's the capacity of a small municipal plant. Larger facilities handle millions. With backup power, with basic maintenance knowledge, you have unlimited clean water while everyone else is dying of dehydration or drinking contaminated sources that kill them through dysentery. The defensive advantages are built in by accident. These facilities are concrete and steel construction. They're designed to handle heavy equipment and chemical storage. That means solid walls, limited access points, industrial security. Most treatment plants have perimeter fencing already. They're positioned away from dense residential areas because of land requirements and operational considerations. Low visibility, low foot traffic. Nobody's thinking about water treatment when they're looting. The strategic invisibility is your edge. Looters operate on immediate resource recognition. They see bottles. They take bottles. They don't see industrial infrastructure and think production capability. The facility looks like a dead end to desperate people hunting for obvious supplies. Map every water treatment facility within a 10-mile radius of your location. Note the access roads. Check the construction type. Assess the surrounding area. Visit during normal operations if possible, and observe the layout. Because water solves survival. The next location solves awareness. Here's a question nobody asks when they're building their prep kit. What happens when the internet goes down permanently? When cellular networks collapse? When satellite communications fragment? When the entire digital infrastructure that connects the modern world just stops functioning? The 97% lose their ability to know what's happening beyond their immediate field of view. They go blind, operating on rumors, guesses, and whatever they can see from ground level. The 3% control the information space. Let me show you the infrastructure that makes this possible. Cell towers, microwave relay stations, radio broadcast facilities. These structures exist in every region, positioned on high ground for optimal signal coverage. They're designed for one purpose: transmitting and receiving electromagnetic signals across distance. And when corporate operators evacuate, they leave behind fully functional communication infrastructure. Here's what remains after the staff abandons these facilities. Tower structures rated for extreme weather and designed to support heavy equipment loads. Backup power systems with battery banks, transmission equipment capable of broadcasting across frequency ranges from VHF to microwave, antenna arrays with coverage radius measured in miles, sometimes tens of miles, depending on elevation and power output. Control systems that can be operated manually if you understand basic radio principles. The technical knowledge required is accessible. Radio transmission follows physics, not magic. Frequency determines propagation characteristics. Power determines range. Antenna height determines coverage area. You can learn operational basics from technical manuals that exist at these facilities, or from ham radio resources that are freely available now, before any crisis. While the 97% are fighting over CB radios at sporting goods stores, trying to communicate a few miles using consumer equipment with limited battery life, you're sitting inside a facility that can broadcast to an entire county or region. You can monitor frequencies. You can intercept transmissions from other groups. You can coordinate between your positions if you've secured multiple locations. You can gather intelligence about threats, resources, and movement patterns. Information advantage wins longer-term scenarios. When you know a raider group is operating 12 miles east, you avoid that area. When you know another survivor group has medical supplies but needs water purification, you have trade leverage. When you know a storm system is approaching because you can still receive weather satellite data through remaining equipment, you prepare while others get caught unprepared. The defensive advantages are built into the structure. These towers are elevated positions with limited access. Most require climbing or elevator access to reach transmission equipment. The facilities are fenced with industrial security because the equipment is expensive. They're positioned away from dense population centers specifically for signal coverage reasons. Low visibility to looters who are hunting for food and ammunition, not communication infrastructure. The strategic reality is simple. In an information blackout, the person who can see what's happening beyond their immediate position has exponential advantage over the person operating blind. The 97% are making decisions based on incomplete information, panic, and speculation. You're making decisions based on actual intelligence about conditions across your operational area. Map the communication towers within 20 miles of your position. Note the elevation and construction type. Identify the access roads. Check for backup power infrastructure. Visit the perimeter during normal times and observe the security setup, because information tells you what's happening. The next position tells you what to do about it. Here's what the 97% don't understand about government collapse. When federal and state personnel evacuate to their designated continuity facilities, local emergency infrastructure gets abandoned. Picture this. The crisis escalates. Government agencies activate their contingency plans. Senior officials, essential personnel, and designated survivors move to hardened facilities that have been pre-selected for exactly this scenario. NORAD, Mount Weather, classified military installations. Those locations were never accessible to you, and they certainly aren't accessible during a crisis. But county emergency operations centers, city coordination facilities, regional FEMA staging areas, those get left behind. They assume these facilities will be defended or occupied by remaining government presence. Reality is different. When the evacuation order comes, when federal authority fragments and state governments prioritize their own survival, local facilities become ghost infrastructure. The staff evacuates to be with their families or to follow their own survival plans. Nobody's staying to defend a county building when civilization is collapsing. The doors lock and the facility sits empty. Here's what they leave behind. Hardened structures built to withstand disasters. These aren't regular office buildings. They're reinforced concrete construction designed to maintain operations during hurricanes, earthquakes, and yes, conflict scenarios. Wall thickness measured in feet, not inches. NBC filtration systems for nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. Independent power generation with fuel storage for weeks of operation. Water storage tanks. Food supplies for emergency personnel. Communication equipment that includes satellite uplinks, radio networks, and hardline connections that might still function when everything else is down. The intelligence value is staggering. Emergency operations centers maintain comprehensive maps of local infrastructure. They know where every water main runs, where power substations are located, where fuel storage exists, where medical supplies are warehoused. They have hazard assessments for the entire region. They have contact lists for critical personnel and emergency resources. They have evacuation plans, continuity protocols, threat analyses. This is the information advantage that the 3% leverage, while the 97% operate blind. The defensive advantages are built to government standards: security systems, limited access points, backup systems for critical infrastructure. These facilities were designed to be the command center during regional emergencies. That means they're positioned strategically, constructed solidly, and equipped extensively. The irony is perfect. Preppers fantasize about government bunkers. They imagine NORAD or some federal installation they could never access. Meanwhile, the county EOC that's actually accessible, actually abandoned, and actually equipped sits in their own city, and they're evacuating right past it toward the wilderness. They dream of bunkers. You walk into the Emergency Operations Center. Defense, water, information, command infrastructure. But here's what kills the 97% after month 3. Run the numbers with me. The average prepared person has stockpiled 3 to 12 months of supplies. Let's be generous and say 12 months. Canned food, freeze-dried meals, rice, beans, whatever they've accumulated over years of buying extra at the grocery store. That's their survival plan. Consume stored resources until things return to normal. Here's the question that separates survival from starvation. What happens at month 13? The 97% never planned for continuous production. They planned for consumption of finite stores. And when those stores run out, they have nothing. No capability to generate new resources. No infrastructure to produce food, medicine, or supplies. They're back to scavenging in a landscape that's already been picked clean by millions of other people, following the same plan. The 3% understand that stockpiles are tactical buffers, not strategic solutions. Real, long-term survival requires production capability. Let me show you the infrastructure that solves the medical sustainability problem. Pharmaceutical distribution warehouses, medical supply centers, veterinary supply facilities. These locations exist in every region to serve hospitals, clinics, and veterinary practices. They're designed for one purpose: storing temperature-sensitive medical supplies and pharmaceutical inventory at scale. When looters hit pharmacies during the initial chaos, they take pills, antibiotics, painkillers, anything in a bottle. They're thinking short-term, immediate use. They're not thinking about sterile supplies, chemical precursors, or production capability. They certainly aren't thinking about the warehouses where pharmacies get their inventory. Here's what remains at these facilities after the obvious looting is done. Temperature-controlled storage rooms designed to maintain precise conditions for pharmaceutical stability. Inventory systems with thousands of items beyond pills. Sterile supplies, gauze, sutures, surgical instruments, syringes, IV equipment, chemical stocks for compounding and water treatment, diagnostic equipment, medical reference materials, everything needed for basic healthcare when the hospitals are no longer functioning. The medical reality in a collapse scenario is brutal and mathematical. Infections kill. A simple wound that gets infected becomes life-threatening when antibiotics aren't available. Injuries that require sterile treatment become fatal when sterile supplies run out. The 97% looted their antibiotics from retail pharmacies. Those pills have shelf lives. 2 years, maybe 5, for some medication stored properly. At month 6, their supply is half gone. At month 12, they're rationing desperately. At month 18, the pills are expired or exhausted. You're sitting in a climate-controlled facility with pharmaceutical-grade storage capability. You have antibiotics by the case, not the bottle. You have sterile supplies by the pallet. You have the chemical inventory to compound basic medications. You have the reference materials to learn pharmaceutical basics. The knowledge requirement is accessible. Basic wound care, infection recognition, proper antibiotic usage, sterile technique. This isn't medical school. This is practical healthcare knowledge that can be learned from the manuals and references stored at these facilities. When everyone else is watching infections turn fatal, you're providing treatment that keeps people alive. The defensive advantages follow the same pattern as other industrial facilities. Concrete construction, limited access points, climate control infrastructure that requires power you can provide with generators. These warehouses are positioned in industrial or commercial areas with low residential density. Raiders hunting for obvious survival supplies drive right past them. Medical production solves one sustainability problem. The next location solves all of them. Now for the part nobody wants to hear. Every advantage has an expiration date. Production facilities generate activity, smoke from generators, movement of supplies, power consumption that creates heat signatures. Eventually, someone notices. Maybe it's another survivor group scouting the area. Maybe it's organized raiders who've moved beyond smash-and-grab looting into systematic resource acquisition. When they find you, you have decisions to make. Defend, trade, recruit, abandon. None of these options are guaranteed to work. Here's the tactical reality. One person defending a facility against 10 organized attackers loses. 2 people defending against 20 loses. The math is brutal and simple. Unless you have numbers, training, and defensive preparation that exceeds the attacking force, you're making a choice between negotiation and evacuation. The timing window is critical. This entire strategy works during the chaos phase. Weeks 1 through 12. Maybe extending to month 6. That's when the 97% are panicked, disorganized, operating on individual survival instinct. During this window, infrastructure sits abandoned because masses of people are focused on evacuation and immediate resource acquisition. But desperation creates organization. After 3 to 6 months, surviving groups consolidate. Leadership emerges. Raiders become coordinated. They start thinking strategically instead of reactively. They identify production capability instead of just grabbing finished goods. When that shift happens, being visible as a producer makes you a target. You're not invincible. Better positioning, better resources, better strategic thinking gives you better odds, not guarantees. Odds. The human threat supersedes everything else. Not radiation, not disease, not starvation. Organized humans with weapons and numbers deciding they want what you have. That's the scenario that ends most survival operations. Your fortified position, your production capability, your intelligence advantage, all of it becomes irrelevant if you're facing overwhelming force. The luck factor remains. Random catastrophe you can't predict or prevent. Fire spreads from a neighboring structure. Someone in your group gets seriously injured, and you can't provide adequate medical care. A disease outbreak hits your area. Equipment fails at a critical moment. You can minimize risk through planning, but you can't eliminate chaos. Here's the moral calculus nobody discusses in prepper forums. You're producing water, food, medicine. Other people are dying from lack of these resources. Who do you help? Who do you turn away? What do you demand in exchange for aid? How do you handle threats? What lines are you willing to cross to protect your position? These aren't theoretical ethics discussions. These are decisions you'll make under pressure with immediate consequences. The 3% advantage is real. Better odds. Better positioning. Better infrastructure. Better strategy than 97% of people will have. That's not safety. That's survival with improved probability. Understand the difference. But here's what you can guarantee. We're at the end. What do you do with this information? You can close this video and go back to your normal routine. Tell yourself you'll remember this if something happens. Hope you'll figure it out. When the time comes, let this become another piece of content you consumed and forgot. Or you can open a new tab right now and start reconnaissance. Search water treatment facilities in your area. Note the locations. Check the construction type using satellite view. Identify access roads and surrounding terrain. Do the same for communication towers. Find the county emergency operations center. Map pharmaceutical distribution warehouses. Locate food processing plants and cold storage facilities within 20 miles of your position. It costs nothing to look. It costs everything to wait. Here's what I know with absolute certainty. The 97% won't do this. They'll watch this video, think it's interesting information, maybe even agree with the analysis. Then they'll do nothing. They'll wait until the emergency alert activates. Until infrastructure actually fails. Until the highways are clogged and violence starts. Then they'll try to make critical decisions with zero preparation and zero reconnaissance. The 3% act when action is free. When infrastructure conflict starts, You have approximately 1 hour of decision time. 1 hour before highway evacuation creates gridlock. 1 hour before obvious resource locations become battlegrounds. 1 hour before the chaos makes movement dangerous and planning impossible. If you've done reconnaissance now, you move with purpose during that hour. You know exactly which facility to occupy. You know the route. You know the access points. You're walking in while everyone else is still processing what's happening. If you haven't done reconnaissance, you're making desperate guesses under pressure, hoping you remember something, trying to navigate to facilities you've never located, competing with everyone else who's equally unprepared. The difference between those two scenarios is the work you do today, not during the emergency. Today. Here's your choice. Be part of the herd that stampedes when crisis hits, running toward imaginary safety, burning resources on evacuation that ends in starvation. Or be part of the 3% who understand that modern warfare creates vacuums, that infrastructure disruption leaves ghost facilities operational, that strategic positioning beats stockpiling. The 97% prepare for extinction. The 3% prepare for occupation and disruption. Welcome to the 3%. Class dismissed.